I want to turn to the Supreme Court, the balance on the court, and the issues before the court right now. President Trump, in just the last 24 hours, saying we've appointed 191 federal judges, 2 Supreme Court justices, keeping his campaign promise to shift the court to the right with Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh. The Affordable Care Act is at the court, climate change is working its way to the court, and a major abortion case is on the docket this year. Vice President Biden, on the issue of abortion, in 2012, you said President Obama's 2 Supreme Court picks, of them, there was no litmus test. We picked people who had an open mind, did not come with an agenda. And you've said before, we both believe that we should not apply narrow litmus tests to appointees to the Supreme Court.
But
let me just ask, would you do it differently as president, Mr. Vice President? Would there be a litmus test on abortion?
If you say the rest of what I said that we're going to not appoint anyone who did not have a view that unenumerated rights existed in the Constitution. That's not a specific test. It's a generic test. And the only reason women have the right to choose is because it's determined that there's unenumerated rights coming from the 9th Amendment in the Constitution. That's what I said. And I was part of the reason why Elena Kagan, who worked for me, got on the Supreme Court. I was part of the reason why Ruth Bader Ginsburg is on the court. I was part of the reason why Sotomayor is on the court, and she swore me in. I presided, and I'm the reason why this right wasn't taken away a long time ago, because I almost single-handedly made sure that Robert Bork did not get on the court because he did not think there should be enumerated rights.
So let me just drill down.
Let's get that straight.
Mr. Vice President, I am aware of what you said, which is why I'm asking, would you do it differently now? Would there be a litmus test on abortion?
Yes, look, here's the deal. The litmus test on abortion relates to the fundamental value in the Constitution. A woman does have a right to choose. I would, in fact, if they rule it to be unconstitutional, I will send to the United States Congress, and it will pass, I believe, a bill that legislates Roe v. Wade adjusted by Casey. It's a woman's right to do that, period. And if you call that a litmus test, it's a litmus test. But what I was talking about in the past, so no one gets confused here, is if you read the Constitution very, very narrowly and say there are no unenumerated rights, if it doesn't say it in the Constitution, it doesn't exist. You cannot have any of the things I care about. Any of the things I care about as a progressive member of the United States Congress at the time, and as Vice President, and as a member of society.
Mr. Vice President, thank you. Senator Warren?
Look, I've lived in an America in which abortion was illegal, and rich women still got abortions. And that's what we have to remember about this. States are heading toward trying to ban abortion outright, and the Supreme Court seems headed in exactly that direction as well. If we are going to protect the people of the United States of America, and we are going to protect our rights to have dominion over our own bodies, then it's going to mean we can't simply rely on the courts. 3 out of every 4 people in America believe right now that the rule of Roe versus Wade should be the law. That means we should be pushing for a congressional solution as well. It is time to have a national law to protect the right of a woman's choice.
Senator Warren, thank you. Senator Klobuchar, I do want to come to you. Should there be a litmus test? It's an active call here tonight. I did want to come to you on this question as well.
Thank you.
Should there be a litmus test on abortion?
I would only appoint judges that would respect precedent, and one of those key precedents is Roe v. Wade. In addition, you have got to put it into law. Donald Trump, and I think it's really important to take it to him here, when he was running for election, and this is a case I will make on the debate stage against him, he actually said that he wanted to put women in jail. He then dialed it back and said, no, I want to put doctors in jail. Is it a big surprise then we're seeing states like Alabama start enacting laws that would criminalize doctors who perform abortions? It's not. And that is why it's going to be really important when you look at the overwhelming public support for funding Planned Parenthood, for making sure women have access to contraceptions, to making sure that they have a right to choose, that we make this case strongly and loudly.
Senator Klobuchar, thank you. Mayor Buttigieg Judge, you have signaled that you'd be open to the idea of expanding the court. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg had suggested leaving the court as it is, saying, quote, 9 seems to be a good number. And in fact, she said if the number of justices is increased, quote, it would make the court appear partisan. It would be one side saying, when we're in power, we're going to enlarge the number of judges to have more people who will vote the way we want them to. Is Justice Ginsburg wrong?
Well, if all we did was change the number of justices, then I agree with her that that could be the consequence. What I've called for is not only reforming the number of justices on the bench, but structural reform so that some of the justices are not appointed through a partisan process. We cannot allow the Supreme Court to continue to become one more political battlefield as we are seeing today. And the time has come for us to think bigger, not just reforming the makeup of the court, as America, by the way, has done several times in our history, but also remember that the founders gave us the power to amend the Constitution for a reason, and we shouldn't be afraid to use it. It's not something you do lightly or quickly, but when it comes to something like Citizens United, which holds that corporations have the same political soul as people, and that spending money to influence an election is the same thing as writing an op-ed to your local paper, we need a constitutional amendment to clear that up and protect our democracy.
Mayor Buttigieg, thank you. Vice President Biden, I do want to come to you on this. President Trump has said that the only reason Democrats want to expand the court is they want to try and catch up. You have called any expansion of the court a bad idea, adding, we will live to rue that day. Do you agree with President Trump on that?
I agree with Ruth Bader Ginsburg. That's who I agree with. And I agree the way to deal with Citizens United is pass a constitutional amendment I introduced 25 years ago, saying that only public money can be spent in elections, period. Not private money, not billionaires, not money from special interests, period. That's the way to amend the Constitution and deal with that. In addition to that, if in fact, look, the Democrats stood up against a man I revere, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He wanted to expand the court, but they were wise enough to understand that whoever then is the majority will have the ability to abuse it, and it will lose its legitimacy. And there are 3 equal branches of government. It says the president shall nominate. The Senate shall dispose. The Senate shall make that decision, not the president. He can nominate. That's why it's so important. We must win back the United States Senate this time out. And that's why, as you all look at it up here in New Hampshire and around the world, around the country, you have to ask yourself, who is most likely to help get a senator elected in North Carolina, Georgia? Who can win Florida, Pennsylvania, Minnesota? Who can do that? Because you got to be able to win those. Well, you can. I agree. But here's the point. You've got to be able to. You've got to be able to not just win, you've got to bring along a United States Senate, or this becomes moot.
Okay.
Senator Sanders.
Thank you. Look, you asked a simple question. Is there a litmus test for those of us up here? For me, there is. I will never nominate any person to the Supreme Court or the federal courts in general who is not 100% pro Roe v. Wade. Number 2, we have got to codify Roe v. Wade into legislation. Number 3, we have to significantly expand funding for Planned Parenthood.
Mr. Steyer, I want to bring you in on this because you have claimed that when it comes to the Supreme Court, you have said Republicans have been cheating.
Sure, they've been cheating. Look, what we saw Mitch McConnell do, not just in the Supreme Court with Merrick Garland, but across the board with federal judges, was refuse to allow President Obama's picks to be considered. That's why Mr. Trump has appointed so many federal judges, because in fact, the Republicans refuse to allow President Obama to get his due. And honestly, we're sitting here talking about, do you have a litmus test? We all have the litmus test. Everybody on this row feels exactly the same way about a woman's right to choose. Everybody on this row feels exactly the same way on gun control. Every single one in this row feels the same way. There's something else going on. These Republicans are in control. They're stacking the court for a generation with young right-wing radicals. And we've watched it happen, and the question is, what are we going to do about it? That's where we are in the United States. And the question is, actually, Joe Biden's right. We have to go win a huge victory this year. And we're in trouble. And so the question is going to be, look at these people. Who can pull together the Democratic Party? And let me say this. We have not said one word tonight about race. Not one word. Are you kidding me? We have the most diverse party. We have a very diverse country. We have a very diverse party. The heart and soul of this party is diversity: black people, Latinos, AAPI people, Native Americans, and white people. But for goodness sakes, pull it together. We're talking about something different. The question we have is, how are we getting that diverse group of people to the polls? What are we saying? Everybody on this stage feels the same way about a woman's right to choose and economic justice. The question is, how do we beat Trump? How do we take down these Republicans? And the answer is, we've got to show we can take them down on growth, job creation, the economy. We send them packing, and then we get all of this, including beating the corporation.